Welcome, friends and family. So excited to be here with you again in How to Win Friends and Influence People. KC Cope and I are going through now the next chapters, How to Interest People. How to interest people. And KC, growing up, who was one of your favorite people growing up? Like when you think back in your childhood.
That's kind of a loaded question. I have a lot of them. Obviously my grandpa was one of them on my dad's side. My Uncle Terry definitely was one of them. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of them. I had a lot of good friends. And, the thing about growing up in the small town of Spencer, there's not a whole lot of people to get to know. And but the ones that you do get to know, you usually build a pretty strong relationship with. So, man, there's a lot.
Well, let's talk about your grandpa.
Yeah.
What made you like your grandpa?
I spent a lot of time with him. I think he passed when I was about 11, 12 years old, somewhere in that area. But up until that time, I spent summers there. Mom and Dad, had 9 to 5s. So he was my babysitter in a lot of ways. He didn't live too far from the house, and, we'd go fish or play cards or just play outside in the yard or whatever.
Did you like to fish?
Oh, yeah, most certainly. Yeah, I grew up doing that, and unfortunately don't get to do it as much now as I used to, but that time will come back around, I'm sure.
So did you like to play cards?
Yeah, we played mainly gin rummy most of the time.
That's what we played a little gin rummy growing up. So how to interest people. The whole purpose of this chapter, very short chapter.
Yes.
But the whole purpose of this chapter is how to interest people. And did your grandpa, did he just pay a lot of attention to you and find the things that you like to do?
Well, there's the aspect of, being family that comes with that. I felt he was very genuine person. He also played guitar,
Wow.
so that obviously has come back to be an influence.
Yeah.
I've got one of his guitars hanging on the wall at the house that I need to have some work done to. He tried to teach me guitar then, and I remember picking it up and trying and just saying, this is never going to happen. I'm just accepting the fact that I'll never play guitar. And
did he give up with you at that time?
No, he would still try to teach me some things and stuff. But again, at 7, 8 years old, trying to learn on an old acoustic with those big old strings, your fingers just don't have the strength. And I'm like, man, this is not cool. I don't know how anybody does this. And of course now look at me, play guitar.
We see you every weekend playing somewhere on the guitar and singing, right?
Yeah, most
but
certainly.
But you didn't know you started that young.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, most certainly. So I didn't do a whole lot then. I wouldn't consider that then. I started.
And he gave you a guitar? How old were you when he gave that guitar to you?
Well, I just kind of got it after he passed. It was one of the things, that I just kind of kept.
And you were 11 or 12 when he passed away?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But,
so,
Casey, the reason I'm asking these questions is because I've watched my son and his relationship with his grandpa. And, man, it is like none I've ever seen, right?
Right.
Dad told me a long time ago, he said, when you have grandchildren, he said, I can't explain it. You just have to experience it. Mm-hmm. But I think that what I see is, my dad just really pours into Noah. It's all about Noah. It is almost sickening to watch how much it's about Noah, right? And I love my son, right? I love him and I love my dad. But it's like I've never seen anybody just get so interested in another person.
Right.
I mean, he cares about Noah. He does whatever, So Noah loves old cars. Mm-hmm. Dad, before having Noah, had no older cars. Now, he kept a lot of vehicles around that half run, right? Like he wouldn't spend money to save his life. But Noah loves old cars. Dad enjoys money, but he's parting with the money to go get those old cars because he knows they interest Noah.
Right.
And they go to old car shows now, and it's just fun for them. Like maybe you and your grandpa went fishing and playing cards.
My dad's a great example of that too. Of course, the experience that I have with my father, with my dad, is anything I took an interest in, he wound up taking an interest in. Right. So fishing was kind of the first one. And, of course, he went out and bought a boat. We started fishing. I remember the first boat that he got, outside of the little John boats and stuff, the pull behind the truck boats. There's 364 days in a year, and I think we calendared about 316 of them on the water out of that first year that we
No
had
way.
that boat.
Wow, man.
And that, whether that was after school going down for an hour, hour and a half,
That's awesome.
whatever.
That's
But
awesome, man.
A lot of days on the water with that, and that continued, all the way up to college pretty much until I got to where my schedule wouldn't allow me to do that as much. But he took an interest in that when I started playing tennis. He learned how to play tennis, took that up, and then I got into golf a little bit when I worked at the state park. So he bought some clubs and we played golf together, and then now we're remodeling this house. And
he's right there with you still.
Yeah,
So nothing's changed over 30-something years.
Yeah, and prime example of the concept of this chapter, how to interest people is you talk about their interests. You find out what they're interested in and you talk about it. There's a story in this chapter from Roosevelt, and he had this gentleman come over to his house when he was younger, and he got to talking about boats. And when the gentleman left, he admired the man, talked about how much he loved boats and all that kind of stuff. And his mom looked at him and said, "Son, he's an attorney from New York. He could care less about boats." And he said, "Well, he sure didn't know a lot about them." He said, "Well, he was just being a gentleman. He knew you liked them, so that's where he kept the conversation at, so that you would enjoy your time."
Yes. And what a classic read, again, for a book that was done decades ago. I don't even know if it may have been a century ago.
Yeah.
I did know when we started this. But that's what a gentleman does. And I love how that was stated, right? That's what a gentleman does. I think of a gentleman as, my son Noah getting the door for a lady, right? That's what a gentleman does. A gentleman pays attention to other people. We're in a world today where it's so easy to brag and boast about ourselves. Look how big I am. Look how big my truck is. Look how big. We're in the richest, wealthiest nation in the world. And more money floating around probably than ever before. And a lot of times we get so absorbed with ourselves, that's all we can think about. And then it becomes an ego and a bragging contest. I would much rather see people pouring themselves into their children, pouring themselves into their families, and to me, this is basic common sense, right? For me, at a very young age, I learned that you sell yourself. And how do you do that? Generally, it's through making people, having people believe that they can trust you and that they like you. And the first part is they usually got to start to like you before they can trust you. So when I would go try to seal coat somebody's driveway, the first approach was smiling, looking them in the eye, shaking their hands, explaining the product to them, showing them maybe the neighbors that just got done. But also, it was about asking them about their driveway, finding out how long it's been and if that was something they're interested in. And so once you built rapport with somebody, they let their guard down enough to find out if they can trust you. The trust factor came when that driveway got sealed and they didn't have to call me back till 3 years later because it stood the test of time. Then you built trust. But a lot of times we want to come in and talk about how big we are, how much we know. And that stops us from getting to that, building that rapport. And in sales, it's always important to understand what's your interest. What do you want? What do you need? And you can only do that by asking questions, which you do a great job of, by the way. You always ask a lot of questions, and I appreciate that about you. You can't solve a problem if you don't ask questions.
Right.
You can go in there and push your agenda, and a lot of people do that in sales, but later on they don't get the referral because they didn't take time to really build the rapport necessary to make somebody where they like you and trust you.
Most certainly. And, questions is definitely the fastest way to get on the same page with somebody and not really have to have the answers. Because if you're asking the questions, you ain't going to have the answers.
Amen. Amen. We should always be kind of like working towards a solution if we're asking questions. And, and whose solution? Not mine, but yours. If you've got that person's best interest at heart.
Correct.
And that's what, folks are looking for in this world. They're having a hard time finding when they ain't got dads in their homes, when single mothers are having to work 40, 50 hours a week to put food on the table and there's no person in there. That kid's growing up with already broken trust and nobody interested in them. And then they turn to a society and a culture that may or may not care about them.
Right.
So when you're in your school teacher position, I know a lot of those kids began to love you because you paid attention to them. They went their whole life with nobody showing interest in them. And then here comes KC, asks them a few questions, actually cares about them, and for the first time in their life, they feel valued.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people are missing. So folks, what we would like to do is just encourage you this week to find interest in how many marriages do you think are going to make it when one person really cares and finds interest in the other person. So I think it can be the saving grace for a family when we truly begin to find interest. Our kid comes home from school, maybe they're having a rough day, and you care about them and you ask questions. Your husband comes home from a long day at work, and you take time to ask him how it's been at work. What was it like today? And vice versa. When, like my wife, she did American Heritage Girls this week, 30 girls that slept over, my wife and 6 other ladies overseeing this lock-in. And I know that takes a lot of energy, but she was so excited. And when she come back and she was telling me all about it, I knew that my place was just to be interested and listen to her and be happy for her. So our challenge is to you this week, learn how to ask questions and just be interested in other people. It goes so far. And people need that today, I think, more than ever. We wish you a very good rest of your week. If we can do anything, please let us know. Thank you.